Welcome to the Switchblade Sisters Social Club. Yet another true crime podcast where two middle-aged friends exploit their worst fears for your entertainment. You're welcome.
For more information, find us on Instagram and Facebook or check out our website at www.switchbladesisterssocialclub.com. Audience discretion advised.
It's the Switchblade Sisters Social Club. I'm Dee.
And I'm Emma.
Hello. So we're on episode 3 of season 4. It goes so fast, doesn't it, Emma?
It really does. Like, I can't believe it already.
It's bonkers. And today is my final one presented to you before we go back to a format of alternating, because I wanted you to get into the swing of things, feel comfortable. You were comfortable from day dot, but I like that we've had this little easy intro for you, you know?
I appreciate it. Thank you.
I think we should have a new section, because one thing that's definitely different is that my sister doesn't drink very much alcohol. We have the responsibility of children, which is one that we have forsaken for our selfish desires of being able to do whatever the fuck we want, whenever the fuck we want to. So, new section. What are you drinking? What are you drinking? I'm going to work on the theme tune. What are you drinking?
Okay. Well, to me, it's always the same. It's always Prosecco, because I'm Prosecco Emma. It's got to be.
It does change for me, but because I wanted to be classy, because you're classy, I brought a wine glass to drink my red wine in, so I'm not drinking it out of a mug. But it's important.
But that's what you do on Zoom calls, though, right? Like when you're in meetings, it's like, it's tea or coffee.
I mix up my coffee. I drink red wine out of a mug. It's rare that I'm sober these days, but hydration is important. So I also have this can of Coca-Cola.
Yeah, that's really, really hydrating.
The wine that I'm drinking is a Shiraz from Wine 52. Look at me like name dropping. If any of these brands want to sponsor us, we're open to negotiations. Agnedi, Lazio Lot, Shiraz. Whatever.
Where's it from?
Look how old I am. I'm this years old. It's from...
No, you've had your eyes lasered. You don't need to do this shit.
When you get your eyes lasered for being short-sighted, you become... It's ironic, isn't it? A product of Italy, contains sulfites. So it's going to be a hangover for me tomorrow. Right. So, Emma, this episode, I'm doing something slightly different in that I'm not covering a specific case.
Oh.
All right. Because I wanted to cover something that comes up in a lot of different cases that I'm fascinated by, and I wanted to sort of learn a bit more about. And I thought maybe that would be a really good episode.
Okay.
Today, I'm going to be covering Broadmoor Prison / hospital.
Oh, interesting.
Now, I say Broadmoor Prison / hospital because it is a high security prison, but it's actually a hospital for the criminally insane. And so I will alternate between calling its residents patients / inmates / prisoners, because they're all kind of used regularly and none of them are kind of incorrect, if that makes sense. But obviously a lot of the cases that we've covered, the residents, the perpetrators have ended up in Broadmoor Prison. Did you ever...
Moira Hindley, right?
Sorry?
Moira Hindley.
I think she did for a while. So because for a while it was... sorry, I have
Your headphones not working.
No, my headphones are not working. So I'm going to change that and just deal with that. That'll be a problem for editing D tomorrow. Yeah, so for a while it was both for men and women. Now it's purely for men. So we do have some women that have lived there, to put it nicely. Did you have any interaction in your lawyer days? I know you didn't do criminal law, so I'm guessing the answer is no, but
No.
I'm sure you had at some point come across cases that involve Broadmoor Prison. So some of the, I'm going to list you some of the famous, the most famous people that had spent time there, and some of them are cases that we ourselves covered. So we've got here. I don't know if I ever knew before researching where Broadmoor Prison was. I don't think
Up north somewhere.
Yes, that's what I thought. Do you know where it is? Berkshire.
Oh.
40-minute drive from us. I nearly took us on a little road trip again.
Oh my God.
I can pretend this is David Attenborough's house as well and take pictures of us in front of it. So we've got Robert Napper, who was done for Rachel Nickell murder on Wimbledon Common in the 90s. He was actually already there when he was convicted of that murder, because he had been convicted of, unfortunately, in the time it took to catch him for that murder, he murdered a woman and her daughter. I'll talk about that more later. So he was already in Broadmoor when he got convicted of this other murder. He was a schizophrenic. And we've also got, I'm going to try to say this name right, but also he killed a man, so I'm not that bothered if I get it wrong. Michael Adebowale, who killed Lee Rigby in 2013, you know, in Woolwich, the military guy.
Soldier. Yeah.
Obviously had Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper. He's probably one of the most famous residents. He was there for a good 30 years. You had, I think, both of the Crays at different times, but Ronnie Cray. I'm going to go into more details for all of these. Charles Bronson, who never got done for murder, and yet is often referred to as the most notoriously dangerous criminal of all time, which is interesting.
Yeah, that's really weird.
Yeah, and I'm going to talk about that a bit more, and we will see whether that little sort of reputation is justified. David Copeland, I'm sure you remember this, living in London around about the time, but he was the one who did the nail bomb attacks in the gay areas of London, up in Camden, I believe, and in Soho. He's there. Graham Young, the poisoner who got done at age 14 for killing his whole family. More info to follow. Some people involved in the 7/7 London bombings. So, I mean, there's some high-profile criminals that end up there.
Do you have to be criminal, like, do you have to be insane to go there? Like, do the two go together, or can you not be insane and be there?
Yes, you have to have mental health issues or mental disorder, and I will go into more details about what that means. And as you can imagine, it changed over time as we have developed more of an understanding of mental health issues. But most of my research came from a really interesting book called Inside Broadmoor, which is by Jonathan Levi. I'm holding it up for those of you watching this. Jonathan Levi and Emma French. A lot of glare from my ring light.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. I also watched two documentaries, one called Broadmoor, which is based on that book, and then confusingly one called Inside Broadmoor, which is the same name as that book, but done by different people, on ITV. It was chilling, I'm not gonna lie. So I mean, the start of this book, while reading this book, I've made 3 different people read the 2-page prologue, because it starts off so fucking grim. It starts off with 2 prisoners killing another prisoner, but in the most way, which I will go into in a bit. But that's how the book opens. I mean, it wasn't going to be a pleasant read. I never thought it would be. But they start off with like the history of the building and of the facility, because it's been open for over 150 years. And I know that we've all got like this preconception of sort of Victorian asylums, and imagine one for the criminally insane. So it's always been notorious. I mean, I can't imagine a hospital slash prison for the criminally insane is ever going to be able to get a good reputation. Do you know what I mean? Where like people
Yeah.
live nearby it, or you know what I mean? People are always going to be wary,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And in 2019, so up until very recently, it had just under 200 patients. But previously it had way more than that. And its reputation has improved. I won't say it's good, but it's definitely improved as we've understood both the treatment of criminals, rehabilitation, mental health issues, mental health disorders, et cetera, et cetera. But it hasn't always enjoyed that luxury of not having a totally shit reputation. So you can imagine it's a compound made up of many buildings. It's actually recently moved into a new building on the same space, same plot of land, because they wanted something a bit more fit for purpose. It has amazing gardens. The area is kind of near Wokingham and Reading and stuff. So, you know, that area, the countryside, is gorgeous, right?
Oh yeah, beautiful. Yeah.
Absolutely stunning. And that was all part of it in the Victorian era. They did see a connection between people with mental health issues and nature and how that could be rehabilitating. But security has always been super intense. When you go there now, it's like airport security, as you can imagine. They take pictures of all the visitors, fingerprints of visitors, et cetera, et cetera. They take your keys off you, your phones off you, anything that could be used as a weapon, and they're put in lockers that are see-through so that everyone can see what's in there. You know, it must be quite intense visiting someone, even going in there as a visitor, right?
So there's no hiding a chisel in a cake.
No, I don't think that.
I wonder if people ever actually did that.
I mean, that stereotype, that trope must have come from somewhere.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Right? So it's a very old Victorian building. And like I said, it's being replaced because it's not fit for purpose. It's falling apart. It's a listed building. So making some of the changes that are required are not even legal according to the planning permissions and so forth. So in the end, they must have decided like, fuck it, we'll just build a whole new building. And I'll go into that more.
That's a good use of taxpayers' money, hey?
Do you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of stuff about obviously ensuring that prisoners can't commit suicide, can't kill themselves. And this Victorian building has bars on its windows. They weren't allowed to remove the bars because it's a listed building, and that's one of the characteristics of this old building. And yet it's something that people can use in order to hang themselves, which is just bonkers, because it's like I'm all for listed buildings and preserving the cultural heritage. But at some point you've got to go, but it has to be practical and useful today, right? So
fucking stupid.
right. Now, the authors of this book talk about how even though there's 200 patients, and I should say this book was written before they moved to the new facility. So they're still in this old Victorian building. Even though there's 200 patients and then a whole bunch more staff than patients even, it feels eerily empty due to the restriction of movements of patients. They describe it as almost a ballet, because obviously they don't want all of the patients in one space at one time. They have patients that have problems with each other, so they have to make sure that they don't interact. And it's just like a coordinated affair, you know? And so you would rarely come across a bunch of people in any one time. So it's just a creepy, eerily quiet feel. So there's different wards, and kind of like hospitals, like non-criminally insane hospitals, they try to sort of make it cheery by giving the wards nice, cute names, right? So all the wards are named after different cute areas in the UK. So you've got the Harrogate ward, the Ascot ward, the Kempton ward. I can't imagine that helps in terms of making them feel more cozy.
Just remember where you're not allowed to go, and we just name everything
Oh,
after
like
it.
the horse
Great.
races at Kempton. Fine, we'll put you in the Kempton ward where you can't even watch it on telly.
Yeah.
So and I was thinking, right, so this I'll show you a picture. Let me find a picture of this building. It's, I don't know if you can visualize it, but it's a very old Victorian building, and there's a clock tower at the entrance. Bring you up a picture so that I can share my screen. But this clock hasn't worked for a very long time. And I was just thinking, if I was in a hospital because I was criminally insane, this might actually drive me even more insane. It's a beautiful building. It's actually a beautiful building, but this clock doesn't work. So it's constantly stuck at just after 6 o'clock.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So I'm guessing that was a planning permission thing as well. So who ends up here, right? Currently, today, it's adults, because there used to be children that were sent there. It's males, because again, it used to be mixed, not on the wards, but there used to be female inmates, patients, prisoners, whatever you want to call them. Clinically insane or severe mental disorders. Often they are prosecuted for violent crimes or arson, or sexual assaults, and they're often seen as a very real risk either to themselves or to the general public, or they've been in other hospitals and they were seen as a risk to other cellmates, other prisoners. On average, it costs £300,000 per person per year to keep them there. I know, it's such a difficult topic to talk about because on the one hand, obviously, everyone deserves healthcare, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And safety in whatever situation they're put in. You don't want these people out in the general public if they're not safe to be out in the general public, but it is a big pill to swallow, isn't it?
Yeah. So what? So £300,000 per person, and you said there's 200 people there.
Yeah, I can't do that maths, but it's a lot of money, isn't it?
I'm gonna do that maths. Hang on.
All right.
I can't do that maths either. But Jesus Christ.
Times 200.
300,000.
So it's like what, 60 million?
60 million.
I can do that math.
60 million a year.
Yeah.
Fuck me.
So it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. So, and we'll have a chat afterwards whether how we feel about it, the treatment and plans for people on there, right? In terms of the people that are inmates, patients there, 70% come from prisons and courts, so they're sent pretty much directly there, or they're in other prisons. 25% come from medium secure psychiatric wards and have to be upgraded to this high security psychiatric ward. And 5% come from other high security psychiatric wards, which they must be like incredibly complex cases if other high security psychiatric wards are like, they're too much for us here. Here's a little quote. Broadmoor patients are all men suffering from mental disorders who present a grave and immediate risk to the public. That's like main criteria. The aim is rehabilitation, but they seem to be very realistic, and the impression I get is rehabilitation to the point where they can be put back into prison.
Right.
On the whole.
It's interesting because I'm just thinking like the one that we did around the first one that I did with you, we were talking about criminally insane people, and like in America, like no one has really been able to get that as a defense, but obviously here
they seem to maybe get it more, or they get put in prisons, normal prisons, call them in quotation marks, and either develop these conditions or are over time deemed as a risk to themselves or other staff, prisoners, etc., and get moved here.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to have a look at what facilities are offered in the States. I'm going to talk a bit about what services are offered here in the UK on the whole. So it's technically a hospital, as I said. It's not isolated. You think of these places being like in the middle of nowhere on a moor, Broadmoor, right? Like far away from civilization, away from us normal civilians, you know, keeping us safe or whatever. But it's actually less than 40 miles from central London. And it's really close to a bunch of villages and towns and so forth. Crawthorne is the nearest village, and it's got 7,000 people. It was a much smaller population when Broadmoor opened originally in 1863, so it might have been a bit more isolated back then. The first inmates were 95 women, most of whom killed children while suffering postnatal depression. Now, the Victorians had an interesting view of this. Like, I don't think they definitely didn't have the term postnatal depression, but they definitely understood that there was some kind of sickness that affected new mothers that led to them committing these atrocities, and that they needed treatment rather than just punishment. So it was seen as an asylum. That's not to say the treatment was good. It's just that they seemed to get that it was people acting out of character, let's say.
Yeah.
And I found this interesting. This is part of the reason I think I was fascinated by Broadmoor, because I went to Royal Holloway University, which has a really interesting background in that it was, there was a guy called, I want to say Thomas Holloway, but he was definitely Mr. Holloway, or maybe Sir Holloway. But he was a doctor or involved in some kind of medical stuff, and he absolutely adored his wife. And when she had some difficulties, he started treating her with these chalk and salt pills or whatever, like basically whatever they thought was the cure at the time for mental health issues. But we now know is actually what creates literal insanity. And she got sent to an asylum. I don't know what happened to her, but it didn't end well. And in tribute to his wife, he set up an asylum for women, and he also set up this university for women, which was Royal Holloway. And obviously since then they now accept men. I went to university with actual boys.
Oh.
But it was a really interesting history. But being at Broadmoor, the Victorians also had a real good understanding of poverty and the links with like mental health issues, because obviously being poor in Victorian England was a fucking struggle and led to a lot of, you know, deprivation, anxiety, depression, acting out of character, in that if they were in a different environment that wouldn't have happened, etc., etc. But the problem was that like life at Broadmoor, the quality of living at Broadmoor in Victorian Britain was probably much higher than living in the streets in Victorian Britain.
Yeah.
So it's tricky, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
I did read a bit in the book about some different Victorian treatments. We already talked about the salt pills and the sugar pills and the chalk pills. One treatment was rhubarb treatment.
Oh my God.
Where,
I mean, I would have found that awful because I hate rhubarb.
I never liked rhubarb. But I was like, fucking hell, how much rhubarb is involved in rhubarb treatment, right? Patients had to eat 50 pounds of rhubarb a year. And I was like, I have no idea how much rhubarb that is, right? I know for you it's too much. If you don't like rhubarb, any rhubarb is too much rhubarb. But it was actually only like 22.68 kilograms a year, which works out at 63 grams a day.
That's not a lot.
It's not a huge amount, but I mean,
No.
it's like, it's about 22 kilos of rhubarb more than I have in a year.
Yeah. I mean, unless you're going to make a nice crumble or something.
do love a good crumble.
I love an apple crumble.
They didn't have antipsychotic medicine in Victorian times, but they did have sedatives, laudanum, and opium, and whatnot. So they did use that to sedate the patients a lot, as well as this rhubarb treatment, which I have to admit, I didn't go to Dr. Google to see whether it had any actual like modern day justification for it. Back in the day, there were 5 mail blocks that were completed in 1864. And some of the first residents were Richard Dadd, who's an artist. And I recently listened to a podcast that I think it was My Favorite Murder, which was really interesting. So he was a well-renowned artist who I think had some kind of psychotic break or some kind of psychosis, which led to him killing his father. So he ended up there. There's also Edward Oxford, who basically had a failed attempt at assassinating Queen Victoria. I never knew about that, did you?
No.
I'm not good at my English history, so.
I mean, I'm not either, and I don't have the same excuse as you.
I mean, I've lived here since I was 7, so.
Yeah, well, maybe you don't have an excuse then.
I just, don't.
Just use it.
Yeah, fine, I'm foreign. And it was definitely seen as the easier option to, let's say, a normal prison. So if you were getting done for some serious crime, you definitely wanted to try to get into Broadmoor versus a normal prison in Victorian times.
I mean, that's still the same now. Like criminals think that you get an easier ride in a mental institute than you do prison, and you probably do.
Well, I'll tell you where the interesting risk is. If you go to prison, you're normally given a prison sentence, X amount of time to serve, and the possibility of being let out for good behavior, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you plead insanity or end up in a place like Broadmoor, you have the risk of being sentenced to go there for an indefinite amount of time until you are deemed safe to be released. So it may or may not be easier than prison, but you may or may not be there for much longer than if you fine, I did it. Let someone log in. So it can be risky.
Yeah.
If you were in that situation, you would have a good lawyer who would advise you well on which. Okay, so in 1913, I'm going to talk a little bit, as much as my brain can cope with, about the different mental health acts, because obviously they change over time, right? Dramatically. And quite often it's led by these prison services for the criminally insane. So in 1913, the Mental Deficiency Act replaced the Idiots Act.
Oh, wow.
Wow. The Idiots Act of 1886, it stated that there are 4 different kinds of people that should not go to conventional prisons. Number 1, idiots. Oh God, so there's like legal definitions of all these terms, and we're laughing because it is quite funny, but it's just like,
I mean, most men.
That's why it's male only now, because they're like, we can't even women to put in these words. People so deeply defective in mind as to be unable to guard against common physical dangers. So they sound more like they're a danger to themselves because they have no ability to even protect themselves. Number 2, imbeciles. Like how there's like a hierarchy of basically like insults.
Yeah, being an idiot.
Yeah. An imbecile is able to protect themselves from common dangers, but not capable of caring for themselves. So a little bit more functioning, let's say, than an idiot. Number 3.
But this is actually awful. Like when you think about the mental health issues that people have, and like, you have people that are paralyzed that can't look after themselves, and all of this kind of stuff. And that's
an imbecile if they couldn't look after themselves in Victorian Britain.
Jesus.
The third type of person who shouldn't be in a conventional prison is the feeble-minded person. and in quotation marks, more intelligent than an imbecile, but still with defectiveness, still so pronounced that they require care, supervision, and control for their own protection of the protection of others. I mean, I do like the fact that they are trying to identify different kinds of vulnerable people.
I mean, to me, it just still all sounds like men.
I know, it's like, well, that's my first ex, and that's my
Yeah.
Oh no, wait, here's my ex-husband. Number 4, moral defects. Mental defects alongside strong, vicious, or criminal propensities on which punishment had little or no effect. So people who literally don't give a shit if they're in prison and just carry on living their evil selves in prison. So yeah, that's Victoria. Well, 1913, that's not Victorian anymore. But yeah, so that's the new guidelines for who should go to places like Broadmoor. As well as criminals, anyone in these 4 categories who was homeless, abandoned, neglected, or habitually drunk, that's where we need to be careful.
Okay.
Could be sent to a place like Broadmoor. This led to 65,000 people being sent to such institutions. Because if you were basically a vagrant, and if they didn't know what to do with you, and especially if they didn't really like you hanging out in the streets or whatever, but you didn't commit any crimes, off to Broadmoor. Which is iffy. It's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
In 1959, the Mental Deficiency Act was replaced by the Mental Health Act. So we're getting a bit more PC, a bit more woke, right? The main outcome for Broadmoor was that it could no longer admit non-offenders. So that's interesting. So now it's not just drunks on the street, homeless people. If they want to tidy up the streets of London and chuck everyone in Broadmoor, they can't do that anymore. It's only people that come under these categories, but that have committed a criminal offense.
Okay.
1863 to 1949, Broadmoor was a criminal lunatic asylum under the Home Office. And then in 1949, which I think was the start of the NHS, right? Broadmoor Criminal Lunatic Asylum became Broadmoor Institution. In the 80s and the 90s is when it possibly had some of its like worst reputation in the media and so forth. It wasn't popular to work there, and often which meant it was difficult to get trained staff, enough staff, etc., etc. And consultants often had 70 patients each. And to put that in perspective, because I was like, I don't know whether that's good or bad, because I don't know what's involved in being a consultant. Nowadays, it's 20 max. So to have 70.
I mean, even that's too much. You know, you think about like how many kids teachers can have, and you know, all of this kind of stuff. And if you're dealing with people who are seriously mentally unwell.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the bit
Wow.
in categories, but I guess that goes back to cost, right? It's always going to be a case of balancing the cost with the right care. And ideally, if you wanted to properly talk about rehabilitation, it would be one-on-one and blah, 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 but that's just not financially possible.
But also like £300,000 a year, and you've got one person looking after 20 people. So you've got like not that many staff. Where the fuck is this cost coming from?
Well, there's other staff. These are the psychiatric consultants.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough.
There's staff, there's a nursing staff, there's administrative staff, there's catering staff, etc. But in the 80s and 90s, these psychiatric doctors, consultants would have 70 patients, and nowadays they have 20. So you can imagine how stretched they were.
Awful.
And also in the 80s, if your crime was even just a little bit unusual, bizarre, weird, or whatever, they would just automatically send you to Broadmoor. We don't know what the fuck to do with this. Send them to Broadmoor, even if you weren't deemed criminally insane. If your case was just a bit, I'm gonna guess there's a high correlation between a bizarre crime and being having mental health issues of some description or mental disorder, but they didn't necessarily check for that. They were just like, this is too fucking bizarre. Off you pop to Broadmoor. Nowadays, you have to be formally diagnosed as criminally insane to be sent to Broadmoor. So there are changes. It's constantly changing. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
And I said now, like, there's 200 patients. Originally, there was 1,000 beds in the same building. I don't know what the staffing was like, but 1,000 versus 200. So can you imagine the chaos? Having
No. Do you,
Victorian England with the hygiene levels as they were, with less security, technology, with 1,000 patients in a place that now holds 200. Ugh.
do you know in terms of like, is that the maximum? Is 200 like, are there people that might be waiting to go to Broadmoor, or is that just what they've got at the minute?
I'll talk to you a little bit when I tell you about the new facility, because like I said, they've moved into new facilities and
Okay.
different capacity and everything. But I just think the fact that it used to have 5 times as many people
Yeah.
must have been just absolute chaos. And like I said, they quite often had staffing issues because as the reputation goes down, no one wants to fucking work there. There's security issues and whatnot. Nowadays, if you are working in the psychiatric field, it's actually seen as very prestigious to work at. Because you can imagine, you see extremely interesting cases if that's your field. Security has improved, facilities have improved, care of, human rights and so forth has improved. So now it's seen as very prestigious. I imagine if you have Broadmoor in your CV, you're sorted, right? Career-wise.
Yeah.
This shouldn't make me laugh, but it did. There's a common saying among staff members there, because obviously you've got to have this fine balance. I could never do this. This fine balance of treating people with care and respect, because you have a duty of care to these people, and it is an NHS healthcare facility. These are technically patients, but at the same time, you fucking know what they've done. And some of those things are just so awful. It takes a special kind of person to be able to do that. Definitely. But there's a common saying amongst those staff members. They're not in here for stealing Smarties. Which is a very nice way of saying, always remember, some of them have chopped up their loved ones with machetes.
Yeah.
So you can imagine the staff training, apart from their medical training, and obviously not all of them are medical staff, but all of like a large portion of the staff members need to have training, not just in whatever their career is in, but also hostage situations and other such things. Imagine you're like, I'm just a medical secretary. I just type up letters. Do 3 months of hostage training. Right?
Yeah. Wow.
And apparently it's really common for some staff members to start and leave within a week because they are just not cut out for it. And I can totally.
I'm sure.
I
Yeah.
mean, no, it wouldn't be me because I would never even apply because I know it's not me. But
you've got to really want to help people to take on that job. Really want to help people.
And just, I think, I mean, I've worked in the NHS as a receptionist at the doctor's surgery, and even that job, you have people coming and telling you their problems, not just their healthcare problems, but all of the other problems that go alongside those and whatever. And it's a lot. You go home and you take home those emotions and their shit with you, and it's you have to get very good at compartmentalizing and leaving work, and that was nowhere near the intensity of fucking this, right? And a lot of the people, I don't know about so much now, but originally a lot of staff members used to live on site, so that was their home as well as their workplace. How do you relax at the end of the day?
You're going to need to have like mental health support for people that work there, like 100%.
I actually didn't come across any of that, but I would be shocked.
No, they have to. Like, There's no way. There's no way you could deal with that.
No. It won't surprise you though that there have been several cases of suicide among staff members, because that is so much to take on. And it just reminded me, it's really upsetting, but you know, I have a history of working with St. John, who do the ambulance service over here. They do ambulance and first aid and training and so forth in a bunch of different countries around the world. And they produced a report, I think it was in Western Australia, about the high instance of suicide amongst first responders, such as St. John ambulance workers, because the shit they have to see and deal with, and then just go home and say hi to their kids. You know what I mean? It's just, those are some fucking brave, amazing people.
Yeah.
Staff support is offered. Oh, here we go. I did come across it. I just forgot. Especially after incidents. But many see it as a sign of weakness.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is obviously a very common attitude towards counseling or mental health assistance. I remember, I think it was Steve Gaskin, when we did an interview with him, or was it Steve Keogh? Okay, it was one of our former detectives who we love so much, talking about after the 7/7 bombing of London, they offered mental health support to the first responders, the police officers, the firefighters, and so forth that were on scene. But they literally, someone walked into the room and just said to the room, "Does anyone want counseling?" And obviously no one stuck their hand up like, "Yeah, I'm struggling," you know? Because that's like a pride thing. And I think in this situation, it's almost a sign of a self-defense mechanism. Because if your patients ever found out that you needed mental health support, I'm sure they would use that to their advantage, right? Like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to lighten the mood, Mabel's decided that she wants to go outside, and you might be able to hear her in the background.
You want to let her out?
Making some noises.
If you want, we can use Mabel as an excuse to take a little break.
That's okay. I'm okay.
All right.
I will do later.
All right, you say when. Mabel, you say when. This is a fun little fact. Heathrow used to donate confiscated cigarettes to Broadmoor,
Oh my God.
but now patients can't smoke in there. The patients had to do chores for rewards, like fags, which I was like, well, that's good. That's like real life. You have to do work for money to buy things.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What I found interesting was that because people lived on site, you actually have quite a few generations of family members working at Broadmoor, which I thought was quite cute, you know? But mainly because they're fucking living at the time in an fairly isolated place. And so it makes sense when you're looking for a first job that your dad, who's the, you know, hospital warden, would give you a cleaning job at Broadmoor, you know?
This is just batshit crazy to me. Like, yeah.
It was described very much as like a village, right?
Oh my God.
Patients worked in workshops, and they still do. And I don't know if this still exists, but there used to be a shop just outside of the Broadmoor walls where people could buy things that had been made by the prisoners. They used to have a lot more socializing. Well, in Victorian times, the Victorians did see a lot, like I said, a connection between mental well-being and nature, but also socializing, play, the arts, and mental well-being, which was very progressive for Victorian Britain.
So we went backwards then, basically.
Backwards for a bit. We're now trying to catch up with Victorian Britain, which is a sad
Yeah.
Yeah. They used to be able to socialize and play, and they got £90 a week to spend on fags or in the canteen. But yeah, it was 90 quid. I don't know what time period this was specifically, but that would have been quite a bit.
A lot. Yeah.
For rent and childcare and stuff like that. Nowadays, it's seen as a violation of human rights to make them work. So you can work. So nowadays, apparently, there's a much higher problem of the patients sitting in their rooms watching TV, all day, according to some of the staff. So that's an interesting debate, isn't it? We touched on it more about human rights for prisoners. It's a tricky one. It's a sticky one. Immigrant surgeons from India and Uganda couldn't find work in the UK because of racism, and they would often end up, even though they were surgeons or specializing in different fields, they would end up in psychiatry, and they would often end up in places like Broadmoor where other people didn't work. So kind of like today, you know, people moaning about immigrants, but actually they're doing the jobs that English people don't want to do themselves. So, and it was interesting because they came from a different attitude. They very much were in favor of therapy and medication. So having these immigrant psychiatrists expanded the use of these treatments. Whereas for a while in the 70s, 80s, and so forth, there was very much a hang them up and flog them mentality. So how does it work when you get admitted to Broadmoor? Let me tell you. For decades, they had the same policy for new patients, and they used to spend 3 months in the admissions wards for a full assessment. Makes sense, right? That they're properly assessed before their treatment plan, their ward is decided on. And patients were divided into 2 categories. Personality disorders, which is enduring pattern of inner experience that are different from society's expectations of what is normal. There's a lot of problematic language there in terms of what is normal, what is society, blah, blah, blah. But it's basically antisocial personality disorders, narcissistic personality disorders, borderline personality disorders, and obviously where it leads to criminal behavior in this case. Because, you know, there's lots of arguments of lots of cases of people having these and being able to lead functional lives, probably causing a lot of damage emotionally to people, but not actually breaking any laws. Says the woman who's dated a lot of narcissists. And then the second category is mental illnesses. So you've got personality disorders, and then you have mental illnesses like schizophrenia, depression, and so forth. These are easier to treat with drugs and therapy than the personality disorders. Personality disorders are incredibly difficult to treat. So group 1, the personality disorders, it's normally just accepted that's a lifelong condition and it's a case of managing it. One significant change is a decrease in the belief that if you commit a violent crime, you are mentally ill. It used to be very much seen as if you've done something horrendous, you must be a psychopath. You must be.
Yeah.
So there's a high correlation. We talked about this in our bonus episode, right? I think people in prison, serial killers were something like 86% psychopaths, but not all of them. Criminals are no longer automatically sent to psychiatric wards. So there was a drop-off in patients, which kind of explained why we went from 1,000 to 200. This is due to a better understanding of mental health, but also violent criminal acts. And also people don't stay at Broadmoor for decades like they used to, because it's more about rehabilitation. And again, usually with a view of rehabilitating them to go back into either a medium security psychiatric ward or a conventional prison. They're not living at Broadmoor anymore for like 30, 40 years, you know, like most of them used to. There are some cases where they probably will never get out, but it's not the norm anymore. There's quite a lot of patients now that get ill or depressed or develop personality disorder while in prison for another crime they've committed, and then get sent to Broadmoor for a period of time before getting sent back. When they get admitted, they're divided up into these 2 categories that they might fall into, the personality disorders or the mental health illnesses. And I've put here, great, so you could have a whole ward just full of narcissists. That must be fun, huh?
Yeah.
There's two wards, the Newmarket and the Sandown wards, which are the mental illness admission wards, and they have 12 beds each. Then you have the Kempton ward, which is the personality disorder admission ward. And then they're divided up according to how much care they need. So within those two categories, personality disorder and mental illness, they're divided up depending on whether they need intensive care, high dependency, or assertive rehab. They kind of go without saying. The staff admission process also is much more thorough. So these days, there's a 3-month induction period. There's a 1-month primary induction period for staff members, and then a 3-month secondary induction where they do intensive training. The patient demographic of Broadmoor, this is so fascinating to me, because obviously, at a time where they didn't have to have a criminal conviction, it's very subjective who gets sent there, right?
Yeah.
But the demographic in the 70s and 80s, this won't surprise you, having sort of been around at the time and for the aftermath, as was I, there was a lot of Irish people in Broadmoor and Irish terrorists, as we have the IRA and so forth, right?
Mm.
Nowadays, there's more Muslims, and there's also a lot of Muslim converts in jail and in Broadmoor. So intensive care, right? What happens when you get sent to intensive care? These patients are either actively suicidal or a risk to others. So basically, physically a risk of harming themselves or others. And when a patient here needs to get moved, there's something called the 6-person unlock. So imagine they just need to get moved from one place to another. They need to have 6 staff members to do that safely. Cool. Which,
okay, I'm starting to understand the 300,000 now.
Right? And this is often with riot gear. So this is so grim. It's like, you've got to be so committed to this career path, because apparently, especially in the intensive care wards, getting piss and shit and semen thrown at you are regular occurrences. And I've got some stats coming up of like staff assaults in a bit, but quite often how it happens is through the little food latch.
Oh God.
Oh. This ward is understaffed. These wards, the high intensity ones, I don't feel like they could ever be staffed enough. Do you know what I mean? But for example, this means very little to me, just except for highlighting that they are understaffed. But there's 1,303 actual staff hours have been served, let's say a year or some unit of time. What they need is 1,808. So it's 500 man hours short. Just terrifying.
Yeah.
Terrifying. According to one nurse, violence on this ward is every other day.
No.
And there's also huge controversy, as you can imagine, around the concept and the practice of physical restraint. And I remember on a much lesser level, my sister having this issue when she was working as a teaching assistant before she became a teacher at a school for children with autism, because you have to protect them and keep them safe. But quite a lot of the children at that nursery had a habit of like just running, you know? And so sometimes you have to do physically restrain them from running out into a street, for example, or whatever. But that's,
yeah, of course, yeah.
But legally, technically not allowed. So it's a moral dilemma, a safety issue. It's a head fuck. So for example, they have had a few cases though of patients dying while being restrained. So Michael Martin died while being restrained in 1984. 88, Joseph Watts died. 91, Orville Blackwood died after being injected with tranquilizers. So these are 3 cases very close together in years, within like a 3-4 bit longer period. All 3 of them were Black patients which also added an extra dimension to the debate, let's say.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that they just had a high statistic of Black inpatients. And so that has added to it. But then also, up until very recently, 2015, Broadmoor got an inadequate care quality commission assessment, which is not great for a high security psychiatric ward for the criminally insane. It's not very reassuring, is it?
No.
Because of the frequency of its use of face down restraints and the high risk of asphyxiation. 30 patients a month were being restrained. 3 patients a month were needing rapid tranquilization.
God.
So, I mean, can you imagine working in that environment? That's
No.
like everyone must be on high alert all the time and defensive all the time, right? On the defense. Like you're never going to have a chill day at work, are you? Like, oh,
No.
I've got a bit of a hangover, I'll just have an easy day. No, these people will not let you.
And then you've got to go home and decompress from all of this shit. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Exactly. And like to give you a bit of insight into some of the patients, I mean, we mentioned some of them already, but for example, one of the patients was a guy called Robert Maudsley. He had turned to sex work and killed one of his clients and ended up at Broadmoor. In 1977, while there, he and his friend, this is the opening scene, you remember the 2 pages of the prologue, him and a friend in prison, David Cheeseman, locked themselves in a room with a known pedophile, David Francis. Apparently, David Francis had hit on one of their friends. So he was tied with a record player cord and tortured, then garroted. They partially skinned him while he was alive. And by the time the staff members managed to get into this room, he died. But there was, in quotes, sperm coming out of every orifice.
Oh.
Like, can you imagine having to deal with that at work?
No. I thought HR was bad enough, but blimey.
Imagine being HR in this place.
No.
They said his head was cracked open like an egg, literally, in that there was a spoon hanging out because some of his brain was missing and they suspect that it had been eaten.
God.
After that, this prisoner, Robert Maudsley, was moved to Wakefield Prison, where he actually went on another killing spree and killed 2 other prisoners. He's still at Wakefield, but he's in solitary confinement. How
Jesus
do you
Christ.
ever see the beauty in life when you're put in such close comparison every day with such evil acts? Whether you want to debate these people are evil or not, the acts are for sure evil. He's actually, Robert Maudsley, in this solitary confinement, he's actually in a glass see-through cell that was built specifically for him in 1983. Because they were like, we can't take any risks.
Wow.
So the high dependency wards are, let's say, a little bit less intense than these, you know, the other ones. There is still a lot of violence. Apparently, they are very noisy wards. Many of the patients were, unsurprisingly, neglected as children and suffered violent or sexual abuse. And oh, interesting fact. Broadmoor has 800 staff members for 200 patients. Still, does not feel like enough. Because in 2013, there was a riot in the high dependency ward where patients broke into the nurse's office and had access to all the confidential files, which came out through a leak where someone revealed the understaffing issues. And that as a result, they would keep patients locked up for 20 hours a day sometimes because they just didn't have. I mean, that's not going to rehabilitate anyone, is it? One of the most well-known residents of Broadmoor is Ronnie Cray.
Mhm.
So sometimes I think about covering him because obviously it's a London crime, but I'm just not that, it's not one that's like fascinated me in the same way.
And they've been so covered, like films.
I have
I
30
mean,
bad, but it's kind of like that gangster organized crime mafia thing that is less interesting to me.
mm,
Maybe because it doesn't seem senseless to me in the same way. It's like their business. I'm not saying it's right, but it's not yeah, I don't know what's
the only thing that interests me about it is the fact that Tom Hardy
I
played
was gonna
them.
say that's when I became more interested, for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it is a fascinating scenario. What I do find really interesting is how in high society they were. Like,
Mm.
which one of was their funeral where you have just like it's A-list celebrity after royal family member or whatever, and it's just like they were in there, you know? They
Well,
had
they're still notorious now. Like everybody knows their name.
exactly. So Ronnie Cray, him and his brother were running their gang, the Firm, in East London. They were linked to politicians, celebrities, etc., including Judy Garland, Frank Sinatra. Not so surprising because I know he had mafia links in the States as well. Um, and they were called up in 1952 for national service, but they kept on deserting. And then, this is less funny, then they attacked a police corporal, so they served time in the Tower of London. I know
Wow.
it's a prison. It was a prison, but I don't think I realized it was a prison up until that recently.
No, I thought it was like a prison in the bloody
Tudor
Tudor
time.
days.
I know.
Yeah.
Anne Boleyn finished, you know,
Yeah.
site.
The
But
two
no.
princes done.
So it must have been like 50s, 60s. It's still operating as prison. Who knew?
Yeah, crazy.
Um, they they got dishonorable discharges from the military, and it's like I don't think they gave a fuck. They didn't want to be in there anyway, but fine. Um, and then at 22, Ronnie was diagnosed with schizophrenia and often was sent to hospitals instead of prisons. In 1968, they were both sent down for a minimum of 30 years for the murder of George Cornell at the Blind Beggar pub. That's like their most famous crime, the one that they got sent down for, as well as Jack the Hat McVitie. Ronnie got moved to Broadmoor to a rehab ward because of his schizophrenia diagnosis. When Reggie was released from prison, he was allowed to visit Ronnie at Broadmoor, and apparently often their visits were just deathly silent, which like I get it. Well, I don't get it because my sister talks nonstop, but like maybe they just needed to be in each other's company a bit, you know?
Maybe.
Yeah. Ronnie Cray's other visitors included Richard Burton, Barbara Windsor, and Debbie Harry.
Oh my. Random.
Random. Ronnie left Broadmoor once in 1982 for their mum's funeral. And in 19 fucking do you know what prisoners have a better romantic life than you do? And you're like, these guys murdered people.
Yeah, but they get those weird ass fans, don't they?
Yes, check out our episode on hybristophilia. 1985, he married Elaine, who had been writing to him while he was in Broadmoor. 1989, they got a divorce. I don't know what the cause of a divorce would be when you actively marry someone who's in prison for murder. And then he married very soon after, in the same year, Kate Howard. He sold the photos and the guest list to the Sun for £25,000, which in 1989 must have been 100 million bazillion pounds. Ronnie Cray became friends with Charles Bronson because obviously they're in prison together. And they'd also been in prison previously together. So, you know, it's like, old friend, how cool, you know?
Reunion.
Yeah. Oh, hi, missed you. What you been up to? When Bronson failed to kill a fellow patient, Ronnie tried to cheer him up by arranging a visit from Terry Downs, a boxer. What is this bizarre world? That they're
Oh,
living.
mate, sorry you didn't kill that guy. How about you get a visit from a boxer? Is that going to cheer you up? I just want to see that frown turn upside
Upside
down.
down, Charlie B. Yeah. In 1995, Ronnie Cray had a heart attack and died. Reggie attended his funeral in handcuffs on prison leave. So yeah, speaking of the rehabilitation ward, because Ronnie was on this rehabilitation ward. By the way, the celebrity appearances in this episode will get even more fucking bizarre. Assertive rehabilitation is the third type of ward. It's like the most stable patients and the least violent patients. So the ones that can hold their shit together a little bit, right? It's normally the last stage before going to either lowered security prisons or hospitals or even being released. So you can, in theory, go from Broadmoor to the outside world. It's the biggest section of the prison. And again, it's divided up by personality disorders and mental illnesses. It has communal spaces. It's got TV rooms. It's even got kitchens for patients to make tea and coffee. And I was like, what? Boiling water? This is where they can get prison jobs if they want. And it's often here where patients wake up and gain enough awareness to the fact that they are having these disorders or mental health issues and that they've committed the crimes. Because if you are insane, or you're having some kind of psychosis, it will take you a while to even accept that, understand that you've even committed a crime. And this is a really sad state of affairs in that a lot of them become well enough to fully understand what they've done. It's only then that they start feeling guilt, remorse in some cases. And so obviously at this point, they become high suicide risks.
Oh, of course.
Because imagine you go into psychosis and you do something completely out of character because of an illness that is not your fault, but you do something horrendous like kill your whole family, which is the case that happened to this one patient called Dante. And by the time he got well enough to comprehend that, it's like, fucking hell, I killed my fucking family. So he's gone on and taken his own life. There's just, oh,
That's horrendous.
it's so grim. And this is where the issue of rehabilitation probably becomes more critical, right? Because the other wards are definitely more about treatment, and as is this ward. But now we're at a stage where we're assessing whether these patients can be rehabilitated enough to either go on to, like I said, other prisons, lower security wards, or even potentially be released at some point.
Right.
That is a debate I'm not fucking qualified for. But there are some cases where you're just like, surely that person can never, ever be allowed to be with others.
I mean, I don't know if you've read that book yet that I told you about, but that's MJ Aldridge book. And it's all about like how you can have, especially like child killers and stuff, like your Jamie Bulger, like, all of that, those killers. And it's a hard one because, again, taxpayers' money. But if you did something as a kid, should you be punished for it for the rest of your life? But then we're paying for people to have new identities, and it's a whole thing about a parole officer, taking it into their own hands, and
like
it's
statistics
just
for reoffending and chances of reoffending and so forth. It's just none of these are hard science,
No.
which is terrifying. So
yeah. I think I might need to. I don't know if you can hear her, but she's really fucking me off.
let's take a little cigarette break. So on that note, we're going to take a break. Guess who's back? Back again. Charles,
I'm not ready.
you get ready.
I need to put my shit back on.
Your shit being your high-tech podcasting equipment.
Yeah, that one. And let me change it to my headphones.
So,
Right.
Charles Bronson,
Say something. Oh, Charles. Oh, okay. Right. We're back into it.
ready?
I'm
So he
ready.
was known as the most violent man, even though he never allegedly killed anyone, according to the courts. At age 22, he was imprisoned for 7 years, but kept attacking staff and patients. He was released after 13 years, and in 1987, he tried to be a boxer. So he's already served prison time, and he's trying to be a boxer, but he was put back in jail for planning a burglary. But he got a life sentence while in prison for taking hostages, which is frowned upon. It was after Arsenal won the FA Cup, he covered himself in butter and attacked 12 prison officers in full riot gear. And I couldn't work out if that meant he was an Arsenal fan or not. Like, was he happy or sad when he did this?
Wait. I think we're missing the other thing here in that. Why did he cover himself in butter?
I
What
imagine,
was it?
like in cartoons, it makes you slippery.
Oh, so he was slippery. Oh.
Grab hold of him, he would just pop out.
Oh my God, that's like a total like comedy sketch.
Right? Except with Charles Bronson, the most violent man in prison, apparently. Another fun fact about Broadmoor, the word nonce,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, well, not obviously, but it means a pedophile or a sex offender, actually originates from Broadmoor because it stands for not on normal concourse exercise. So if you were a pedophile or a sex offender, you were high risk in Broadmoor, like in other prisons, in that there's a bit of a hierarchy, isn't there, in prison? And if you were committed one of those crimes, quite often you'd be the target for other prisoners. And so you'd often get segregated in terms of your time out and so forth. So it was people that had to be kept separate for their own safety. So not on normal concourse exercise, which is abbreviated to nonce. I did not know that. Did you know that?
I did not know that. I knew it was like to do with a paedophile.
Yeah. What did they teach you on your law degree? If not fun, Broadmoor facts.
Not the right stuff, obviously.
No. Patients are searched throughout the day. Like you have several searches a day. And when they're in their own rooms, they're checked in on every 15 minutes. Just like fucking, it's a lot. This day-to-day must just be exhausting for everyone involved. On average, there's 5 attacks on staff a week, including kicking, biting, punching, and includes the throwing, as mentioned, of piss and shit and semen. Nope. I've written in my notes, nope.
Yeah, big nope.
Verbal assaults happen at least 30 times a week. Obviously less serious, but also not pleasant.
No, you're going to expect that though, aren't you?
Right. It's important to remember though that these are technically patients and therefore are considered vulnerable, and the staff members have a duty of care to them. So we have a case in 2010 where a nurse, Rhoda Sibanda, was added to the sex offenders register because of her taking advantage of one of the patients by having a sexual relationship with them. Now, even if it is consensual, if someone is vulnerable and you have that duty of care, it is still considered an abuse of power, isn't it? And yeah.
Rape, I think.
Sorry? Rape.
I think it's rape.
Yeah. So she's got added to it's definitely some form of sexual assault. But the most known abuser in Broadmoor, I don't know how this entire scenario slipped me by. Jimmy Savile.
Oh no.
I don't know why, but I did not get any of this link to Broadmoor. He's obviously known for his abuse of the vulnerable at places like Stoke Mandeville Hospital, Leeds General Hospital, Infirmary, and so forth. But I didn't know about his link with Broadmoor. Because I was thinking, why would he fucking try his shit with the criminally insane who are violent murderers? But it was at a time where there were still female patients. because that was his MO.
Wait. Was this before he got arrested for all the shit that he
Yeah.
did? So he
Well,
wasn't an inmate.
he was never arrested because all of that came out, if you remember,
Because
after
he died. Oh, of course. Yeah, of course.
that. It was
Oh, shit. So he was going to Broadmoor and fucking messing with people. Oh, Jesus Christ.
it,
Just
it
when you think he couldn't get worse.
oh my God, it's just horrifying. Like, the thing that is so shocking about the Jimmy Savile case is obviously the amount of abuse that he doled out, but also the culture of silence around it and the way the celebrity factor that just meant that he had the run of these places. I mean, let me tell you how bonkers this is, right? So there's a bit of debate whether he initially contacted Broadmoor or whether they contacted him. Obviously, no one wants to admit to having made that first phone call to Jimmy Savile to come in and do some form of activity, entertainment, etc. for the patients. But in 1968, he was in his heyday. It's important to remember when understanding this, how big a star he was, right? He said that he got lots of fan mail from patients in Broadmoor, and so should he come and have a visit, for morale or whatever, which played very much in line with our ethos of keeping morale up to help with the rehabilitation. And also the hospital was fighting constant battle against bad reputation, so they thought this would be a nice, like, little PR.
You're not a fucking army camp, like, for fuck's sake.
Right? He gained enough trust that he got a set of keys. This set of keys gave him access to pretty much everywhere, including patients' rooms.
Oh, for fuck's
Like,
sake.
on what planet would he need that? What was the rationale there? I do not know. He wanted to be the entertainment officer and help run the place. He even got given an apartment on the grounds. Now, at the time, there were still female patients, and Savile started organizing female-only discos, all-female discos, which makes sense that they wouldn't be mixing the female patients with the male patients who are convicted of rape and all these sexual abuses. Pat McGrath, the doctor running it at the time, said that many people disagreed with Savile being able to just come and go unannounced.
Good.
I disagree with it. I mean, even if you didn't know what we know now, I just don't understand the logic. You've got this high security place, yet just because he's a celebrity, you're like, fuck the rules. You can come and go as you want.
Oh my God, this is crazy.
But a lot of people, like we've heard time and time again with this case and other similar cases, felt they couldn't challenge the authority of the institution where they worked. Like we heard, with the BBC, so many people bore witness to suspect activities, but they really were not in a culture where they felt like they could, come forth and really make a complaint about this without facing severe consequences themselves. In 1987, Savile was made a leading member of the task force for running Broadmoor. So it's like
This
not
gets
just the
worse.
treatment program, the entire facility. And I know they didn't know what they know now, but they also knew that he didn't have any experience running a high security prison or hospital. Meanwhile, female patients said that he stared and made inappropriate comments while they showered naked in front of staff. Why the fuck is Jimmy Savile in the showers? I get why they are monitored by staff members, professional healthcare workers, employees of the establishment. I don't understand why Jimmy Savile is there.
Jesus Christ.
At least 5 patients were thought to be sexually assaulted by Savile, some repeatedly. I'm gonna predict, allegedly, that it's far more. This is hearsay because it comes from other patients, and obviously it must be a struggle being a patient of Broadmoor and trying to get your voice heard and take it seriously. But apparently 2 of the victims of sexual assault actually took their own lives. And all of this was only investigated after his death, like his other crimes. So he died in 2011, and this only started coming out in 2014. I'm just gonna lull out because I don't know if you can hear her groaning.
I can. I thought it was Mabel.
No. It's my bulldog this time.
Do you want to know a fun fact?
I do. Is it a fun fact about Jimmy Savile?
It actually is.
Go on.
I actually wrote into Jimmy Savile and asked him. I asked him for my mum's 40th birthday because, like, you know, I like this again, Emma the nerd. For those that don't know me, I love everything nerdy, cars, F1, as you know, Lego, building Lego. I mean, no one's ever going to want to listen to the podcast again, so this might be the kiss of death. But I also love aeroplanes and fighter jets and, you know, all of things like that, and love going to an air show and all of this kind of stuff. Oh my God. Anyway, and after Top Gun, the first one came out, loved it and loved F-14s, and used to have, not only did I have Take That pictures on my wall, but I had pictures of
Any logins?
aircraft and F-14.
Oh, also fighter jets. Okay.
Also fighter jets, yeah. Not Jimmy Savile, thank God.
Oh my God.
But I wrote into Jim Will Fix It for my mum's 40th birthday and asked if she could get taken up in an F-14. And also if I could go in Kit from Knight Rider, because I was obsessed with Knight Rider.
Yeah. Such a good show.
Luckily, he never responded. I mean, obviously at the time I was pissed, but now I'm very happy.
First mistake was saying your mum was 40 because he was not interested.
Yeah, but he, you know, me, you know, I would have been more his type, but
it's just, that is a really sad era in the history of this country, isn't it?
And Rolf Harris as well.
Yeah, because again, it was the power that these people were able to have, and the fact that it was like a unspoken like a known secret. What's the word?
Yeah.
You know,
Well, it was like with Philip Schofield as well, isn't it? And now this Hugh Edwards.
And the fact that it was so calculated, because basically they were able to come up with 11 allegations of sexual abuse towards 6 patients, 2 staff members, 3 minors, because they had at one time children under 18 at Broadmoor as well, 2 male staff, 2 male people, and 2 of the victims were male and 9 were female. And it's pretty much confirmed that these happened, you know, as much as you can prove.
That is horrendous.
And then there's another 5 cases that came out during Operation U-Tree, which was obviously the separate investigation into his crimes. He even managed to get his unqualified mate, Alan Franey, I'm going to say, the role of general manager at Broadmoor. So he had so much influence, he managed to get his friend, unqualified, become the general manager of a high security psychiatric hospital.
Not only like is that fucked up beyond belief, but foobar, as they say, but like, why? Like, why did he even want to do that? Like,
well, these were, you know, he had his MO. He was like super calculated, you know.
His crime picking grounds, or
he knew that these children in homes for, you know, difficult children and these mental health patients and so forth, if they did even say anything, it would be so difficult for them to be believed because of the reason why they're in these institutions and the stigma against them. He knew what he was fucking doing, wasn't he? So in 1998, they decided to be a bit more strict with their policies and take the keys off of people who did not need to have keys to patient bedrooms. He still had his until 2004, but he stopped coming along to Broadmoor as much because obviously he couldn't do what he wanted to do anymore. But just the fact like that any of their non-official staff would have access to their bedrooms.
It's like they were so careful in keeping men and women separate, and all of that kind of stuff, and, you know, people who didn't get on and all of this kind of stuff. But then they were allowing a fucking celebrity to come in, what, because he's a good person, because he's a celebrity. Like, Jesus Christ.
Right?
It's just, that's batshit crazy.
Yeah. And we'll go back to more crazy Jimmy Savile stuff as well, by the way. In terms of their day-to-day life, many of the patients, it won't surprise you, have weight issues because a lot of the meds that they have to take for their treatment cause weight issues. They're one of the side effects. Obviously, you're moving around a lot less than you might in the outside world. And also, if the ones that are working in workshops, they get money that they can spend in the shop, for example, but the only thing the shop sells is basically junk food. So snacks, you know. There's a 20 to 25% rate of diabetes compared to the national average of 6%, which again is probably contributing to that £300,000 cost.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? Obviously, there's a high need to treat substance abuse. Many people come in there with substance abuse, whether they've come from the outside world or whether they've come from other prisons, because we know that substance abuse is still possible to have an addiction in prison, unfortunately. And I've already talked about that risk of going for the diminished responsibility plea because it means you might have an open-ended sentence, which might work in your favor, but it might not. Just reading through my notes. Just reading through my notes. Can
you definitely not hear Mabel snoring?
I can't hear her snoring. It's because you got a very directional mic. Broadmoor is not the only prison of its type in this country. There's 3 others in England and Wales, but they're actually all in England, but covering the area of England and Wales. You've also got Rampton, which is in Nottinghamshire, and Ashworth, which is in Merseyside. In total, there's 3,000 staff members at these 3 facilities looking after 750 patients. So that ratio has got to be high, leaning towards the staff. You know, there's also one called Carstairs in Scotland, which I'd never heard of. Rampton started as an overflow hospital for Broadmoor, but then became the biggest of the 3. Ian Brady, who was responsible for the Moors murders with Myra Hindley, was refused admission to Broadmoor and sent to Ashworth instead. Apparently, Pat McGarth, who I told you was one of the prison directors for a while, he was one of 2 people that he's ever met who he said was categorically evil, not sick. So he didn't want him in his facility. So I didn't know that that was an option, that they could be like, nah, not that one.
Is he qualified to make that distinction?
I'm gonna hope so, but he's also the man that gave the keys to Jimmy Savile.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly.
Also, so at the very least, he's got some lapses of judgment there. Savile was also reportedly responsible for abuse of several patients at Ashworth as well. So one of the other high security hospitals.
Free reign.
Just ridiculous. They obviously all have a history of abuse towards patients. In hindsight, what we would consider abuse. There's one inmate from Ashworth, Stephen Baggett, in 1996, which feels really recent, but is actually quite a long time ago, but is also really recent to us. He actually escaped on a day trip and made a call from Dirty Harry's bar in Amsterdam. And he said, I'm going to come back. I don't mean to genuinely escape. I've done this as a bit of a PR stunt to draw attention to the fact that there are some serious abuses taking place in the hospital. And he did genuinely come back, but sadly, his accusations were pretty much dismissed. But he said that there were patients there who had access to drugs, alcohol, hardcore porn, an 8-year-old girl. So a pedophile had convinced one of the former inmates to start bringing in a child that was in his care, and he was left unsupervised with his child
Oh
in
my God.
a security psychiatric hospital for the criminally insane. It was only much later on, when there was a new MP for the area that Daggett's parents lived in, that case got picked up again and properly investigated. There was a raid on one of the wards, which was one of the personality disorder wards, which found porn even available at the shop. So they're not even trying to fucking hide it. There was more than 800 videos found. 225 of the videos was found in one of the bedrooms. It included porn containing bestiality and child abuse. So they found children and women's underwear. The 8-year-old girl that I mentioned, she was taken into care because obviously her primary caregiver, is bringing her into a hospital to be left unsupervised.
Jesus Christ.
It's just awful.
I don't have any words. Like,
it's horrifying.
How does this shit even, I mean, you know, well, they let Jimmy Savile in, so I shouldn't be surprised.
An inquiry, the Fallon inquiry, where they did change a bunch of the rules. So for example, now a child can only go and visit these facilities if they're actually related to the patient, to the inmate.
But they fucking shouldn't be allowed in, full stop.
And even then, I think there's restrictions, but you can't just bring in a child to a pedophile, you know? And there's also been higher security implementation in all of those 3 hospitals.
Good.
I mentioned that they had a high problem of suicide. 8 suicides between 2001 and 2008. And the hospitals then therefore deemed as unfit for purpose. It still took a good 20 years for them to do anything about it. For example, there's no clear lines of sights. They have T-shaped wards, which you can imagine is a bit of a problem when you want to have clear lines of sight of some of these very dangerous individuals. There's also the bars on the windows, which I told you they weren't allowed to remove because of planning. I mean, it's a building built at a different time, right? So in 2009, they started plans to build a new hospital on the grounds. This whole project is going to cost 200 million, or was going to be costing that 200 million. They had an ambitious move date, typical builders, isn't it? Yeah, I'll get it done in 5 minutes. They were supposed to move in 2019, but I think it was 2017, and it was actually 2019 that they managed to move, and it was a good 50 million pounds over budget. But do you know what I found, which I'm super proud of? The old hospital is for sale, and I found the brochure. Do you want to see? I don't know how much.
Yeah.
Because it's price on application, which means very fucking expensive. But I think it's got planning permission or part planning permission or whatever. I don't know. It's not my area of expertise. To become a residential development. They talked about turning part of it into a boutique hotel. You can imagine the novelty, right? But look, I mean, it's massive.
So the new bit, new bit then is on the same area or not?
Yeah, it's in the same bit of land. I'm just downloading the document, sorry, because I want to show you all of it. Yeah, so it's on the same bit of land, but
I don't know about you, but there's no fucking way ever that I would want to even visit that prison, let alone live there or stay overnight, or no fucking
once
way.
they start developing it, we go pretend we want to buy a property and go have a little looky look.
Oh,
but I mean, look at that, it's massive. Like, it's going to be one of those proper,
it is huge
condo developments with like,
but look, this is a selling point.
This blurred out bit, I think, is the actual new hospital.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I want to live that close to fucking offenders. Definitely. Mental fucking offenders.
The town looks
When
cute.
I went to San Francisco, I went to Alcatraz and I didn't even like that. Like it's just
Yeah, but you
I don't know.
vibes a lot, don't you? Like I too would fucking not like it. This is all planning.
Yeah, the vibes in that place were fucking terrible.
Area's gorgeous. Um,
Yeah, but no, you're not selling it to me. I'm sorry.
but yeah, that's the brochure for while we're here, I'm gonna show you the new hospital. It looks more like a hospital, basically. It's more fit for purpose. They've removed what they call ligature points, which is a really horrible way of saying things that people can use to take their own lives, such as bars on windows and so forth. But that looks more like a hospital, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I actually do feel a lot of reassurance knowing that they're in a more fit for purpose building. I think they will get the care and treatment.
Yeah, no, definitely. Definitely.
It's safer for the staff, hopefully less escapes, et cetera, right? Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of articles that you can follow and read about what's happening with the old building. Obviously, there's a lot of like historical conservation societies that are concerned about maintaining its integrity and so forth. But it does look like it seems to have got permission to be converted into these residential buildings. And it went up for sale in April 2024, so this year, hence the brochure. It's 150,000 square feet, which is like too many square feet for me to even fucking understand. And it did make me kind of want to buy it, but kind of not. But yeah, that was the book. That's the book I read. But then I went down a little rabbit hole and I watched every documentary I could find on Broadmoor. So, and all the links will be in the show notes, et cetera. But there was even one thing that came out that I was fascinated by was that there's a theory that Jack the Ripper ended up in Broadmoor.
Oh.
Because obviously we don't know who Jack the Ripper was, but there was a man called Thomas Cutbush who was a manic disruptive patient in solitary confinement at the end of the 1800s. And as we probably know, Jack the Ripper killed 5 women between 1888 and 1891. They were all killed in very similar ways. They were strangled, their throats were cut, they were mutilated, and their organs were removed and quite often taken away. Cutbush was then convicted of a very, very similar crime. And as soon as he went to prison, these murders stopped. So there is a theory that he was the one who might have been Jack the Ripper.
You know what the problem is with drinking Prosecco?
There's no problem with drinking Prosecco.
Well, I mean, there is a little one, like it's quite burpy.
Oh yeah, but that's fine. I can edit that out. There's obviously been a lot of different security measures and changes over the time, but one of the things that they had to work on was their alarm system. So they actually have an alarm system, kind of like an air raid siren for when there's an escape, because they had an issue. In 1952, John Straffen was a convicted child killer who was at Broadmoor, and he escaped. He climbed over the wall, he escaped, and in the 2 hours that he had escaped, he killed a local child.
Oh my God.
So as a result, they had to raise the walls of the prison, and they also made the alarm that is sounded when there's an escapee louder, basically, so that it's heard further away. Because obviously, if you live in that fucking village, you want to know if there's a fucking convicted child killer on the loose, right? Obviously, this was incredibly bad, as per usual, for the reputation of the hospital, but it did see a bit of an improvement once they discovered chlorpromazine in the 50s, which was an antipsychotic drug often used to treat schizophrenics. They also, like I said, reduced the amount of patients, and but in 1972 they had another little, let's say, backslide in reputation because of Graham Young. Now, I used to love this film called The Young Poisoner's Handbook, which was it was a dramatization film about Graham Young. He is the one who was like a child genius, I'm gonna guess, because he was obsessed with chemistry and experimenting with these different things, somehow got hold of poisons and decided to experiment on by killing his whole family. Like proper note taking and all sorts. It was literally seen as a scientific experiment for him, right? He lived in Neasden in London, so local boy. And he went to Broadmoor, even though he was only 14. He was the youngest prisoner there for a long time. And he became a model patient, and after 9 years of his 15-year sentence, and again, bearing in mind he was a child when he when he killed his whole family, he was discharged. But then for some reason, well, I know what reason, Broadmoor wasn't allowed to release the nature of their crimes to future employers and so forth. So that led to Graham Young, the chemist who enjoyed experimenting with poisons in order to kill people, to get a job in a photo lab.
Surrounded by all the chemicals.
All of these chemicals. He lived it was in a town called Bovington. He then poisoned so many people that there was something known as the Bovington bug. Like, people were like, oh, you must have the Bovington bug, because so many people started falling sick. And 2 of them died. He poisoned 70 plus people, 2 of them died. So obviously there's always a risk when releasing any offender, right? And he went back to prison. He didn't go back to Broadmoor, but again, massively affected the reputation, feeds into this debate about whether rehabilitation is possible and for whom. I don't have the answer for that. I'm not qualified and just don't fucking know. They also obviously, well, I don't know whether this is obvious, but for a lot of cases they use chemical castration, which has again had mixed results, but for what they were saying is that for a lot of sexual offenders and pedophiles, it is not something that can be cured, that attitude or that urge or that desire. But if you can stop them acting on that desire, that's the next best thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's life in Broadmoor. Chemical castration, suicides, piss and shit. New facility. Just, you know how we said in the last episode, let's never go to prison. Let's also never go to a high security psychiatric ward.
No, I'd rather not. And I'm actually really struggling to figure out if it's worse for the people that work there or the prisoners.
I mean, it's just fucking horrendous, isn't it?
Yeah. And I mean, I'd be really interested to see like the different points of view on mental health now compared to then.
Yeah. I'd be fascinated to talk to someone who worked there. Right?
Because there's all sorts of things like, you know, with ADHD and stuff like that now, where people would like don't have any empathy, don't have any remorse, don't understand necessarily what they're doing, but you know, just say sorry because they know they have to, but actually don't have that whole,
and that's part of it's the personality disorders that are often incurable, and it's more a case of teaching them societal expectations of how to behave. And for some cases that's possible, and for others less. And it's just,
but also like I'd be really fascinated to know like what constitutes a mental health issue and what constitutes a personality disorder.
And again, that's
surely the line
changing, isn't it? Yeah. And as well as a lot of things being present simultaneously.
Yeah.
How much leeway do you give to someone when it is a mental health issue? You know,
Yeah.
is it their fault if they have a disorder?
Because I'm so sure that, like, there's so many different versions of ADHD. I'm so sure that actually most of the people we diagnose as psychopaths actually have ADHD.
I mean, I'm sure that there are a lot of cases of misdiagnosis. We know this. So
Oh, 100%.
and the problem with
100%.
diagnosis is that you then are not treating the right thing in the right way.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's just a fucking minefield. Like I don't
It is.
anyone that works in the field of mental health, and especially when it's involved in the criminal system, because like Jesus Christ, that's a lot to fucking deal with. But the thing that just shocks me that I'm going to end on, because it's quite comical. Jimmy Savile got to be quite close with the Yorkshire Ripper, of course. And the Yorkshire Ripper was, I think he was sad or something because he hadn't got parole or whatever. But basically, to cheer him up, Jimmy Savile brought in Frank Bruno to meet the Yorkshire Ripper. Frank Bruno was like, I had no idea what I was fucking going in for. He didn't say. He just said, come in and meet some, like he knew he was going to Broadmoor. He was like, come in and meet some of the patients. It's only after the fact that he was like, this is me shaking hands with the Yorkshire motherfucking Ripper.
I have literally no words.
This is one of the most bizarre photos I've ever seen. What this photo represents is just, to me, batshit crazy.
What is it with people bringing in boxes to cheer people up? Like one of the craze did that as well. Like, what?
I mean, I think it would cheer me up too.
And I don't think it would cheer me up. I'd be like,
Make me more sad.
okay.
I'd just be like, well, this is fun, a boxer, sure. I don't know. If I was in prison, I'd definitely be like, yeah, bring anyone to
Yeah, well, yeah, that's true. That's true. But Jesus
uh,
Christ.
so yeah,
I feel really sorry for Frank Bruno there.
yeah, because he got duped. But at the same time, where the fuck did you think you were going, and who the fuck did you think you were going to meet at Broadmoor?
Yeah, true.
Think about it, Frank. Use your noggin. Um, Now it is time for the section where we don't have a song yet, so I'm going to make one. Apply to date the and/or Emma. Finger guns out because it's a garage song. Yeah. Okay. Today we have an application from the other rum and coke in our 2 rum and cokes and prosecco drinks order, Helen.
Oh, wait. So just have to say, I don't know any, these go straight to D. So I don't see them. I don't know any. This is all a surprise to me.
Helen would like to date the both of us. That's good.
Okay, good, because otherwise then we'd have issues.
Oh my God, can you imagine? She knew.
No. Yeah.
I suspect she doesn't want to date either of us, but she was very kind to say both of us. Her location, round the corner from us, true.
Yeah. Handy.
Yeah. What's in your fridge right now, Helen? A lot of cheese. That's the way.
Oh, she loves cheese. Oh my God, I've never met anybody who loves cheese more than Helen.
Who doesn't? Favorite Ninja Turtle, Leonardo. I like purple. We'll allow it. Perfect first date. Us 3, rum and cokes, fairy lights, sofa.
Oh my God, she's so cute. But wait, just wait 1 second.
She forgot prosecco, but I'm sure she meant it.
No, not that. Leonardo.
Oh, we're going back. Okay, yeah, Leonardo.
Yeah. I believe he was blue.
Donatello was purple. Helen.
Yeah. Sorry.
She's
Sorry
probably,
to like nerd Emma's coming out again, but
she was probably.
I know my Ninja Turtles.
Do you think it would be helpful for that question if I uploaded a picture of the Ninja Turtles with the names like I did with?
I mean, I think for us turtle aficionados, I think it's okay, but for others, no.
Yeah. Do you have any crazy exes? I'm the crazy one. That's probably true. Are they crazy because of you? Yes. Exclamation. Weird fact about you, I love you. That's not weird. That's not weird. That's totally normal. Everyone loves that.
Odds.
Some things you like: pizza, dogs, rum, tattoos, beards, in brackets, on men.
Okay, that's useful.
Yeah. Last time you cheated on your taxes, not putting anything in writing, you can't prove anything. No. Anything you would like to tell us? She's put, I better win this. Win us? We're not trophy wives. Oh, I'd love to be a trophy wife. I'd just podcast all day. Chinese food all night. Yeah, so that's Helen's application. What do you think? Should we accept?
I mean, yeah, I mean, she does already, like, we're seeing her on Thursday, so
Going on a date on Thursday. All right, cool. She wins this. She wins.
she wins.
All right, well, on that note, I think we should say goodbye to our sexy listeners. Go on.
Thank you for welcoming me with open arms. I really appreciate it. The sister from another mister.
Our next episode, Emma's gonna be presenting.
Yeah, it's gonna be me. Oh my God.
Oh, I can't wait.
It's really grim. It's really grim.
Not a single idea about what you're covering. Anyone who wants to apply to date us, which is not very many people, but it's on the website, switchwaysistersocialclub.com. But if you don't want to date us, but you think we need help, that's probably a higher percentage of the population.
Yeah.
There's also a form to give us dating / relationship / life advice. So,
which we need.
Oh my God, so much. Right. Well, on that note, goodbye, sexy listeners. Bye, bye. Love you. Bye, bye, bye.
Bye.